The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched wide enough to hold a small city. 12 different species sat in their special seats, each designed for their unique bodies. The air hummed with translation devices that turned alien words into something everyone could understand. Today was Judgment Day for humanity. Ambassador Zethkri stood tall on his forelegs. His blue skin shimmered under the bright lights as he looked down at the human sitting alone in the center of the hall. Chenwei looked small compared to the massive aliens around him, but his back was straight and his eyes were calm. "Honored council members," Zethkri began, his voice echoing through the chamber. "We gather today to decide the fate of the human species. For too long, we have watched them spread like a disease through our peaceful galaxy." The other aliens nodded their various heads. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others had 6 eyes or no eyes at all. But they all agreed on one thing: humans were trouble. "Let us review the evidence," Zethkri continued. He pressed a button on his desk, and images appeared in the air above them. In the past 50 years since first contact, humans have started 14 wars with other species. They have broken 47 galactic treaties. They refuse to follow our laws about weapon development. The images showed human soldiers fighting on distant worlds. Ships exploding in space, cities burning under alien skies. Chunwei watched quietly as his species' worst moments played out for all to see. "But that is not all," Zethkri said. His voice grew louder with each word. "They multiply too fast. They take resources without asking. They build weapons when we tell them to make art. They explore places we have marked as forbidden. They are barbaric and dangerous." A murmur went through the hall. The aliens whispered to each other in their strange languages. Some made clicking sounds. Others hummed low notes that made the floor vibrate. Ambassador Crystal of the Hegemony raised one of her many arms. Her insect-like head turned toward Chunwei. "The human representative may speak now, but know that our minds are already made up. This is merely a formality." Chunwei stood up slowly. He was only average height for a human, but something in the way he moved made even the largest aliens pay attention. He looked around the hall, meeting as many eyes as he could. "Honored Council," he began, "you speak of our wars, but you do not mention that we fight to protect the weak. You talk about our treaties, but you forget that we break bad laws to save innocent lives. You call us barbaric, but we are the only species here that has never tried to wipe out another race completely." Some of the aliens shifted in their seats. A few looked uncomfortable. Chunwei walked closer to the center of the hall. "Yes, we are different from you. We do not wait for permission to do what is right. We do not form committees to decide if someone deserves help. When we see suffering, we act. When we see injustice, we fight." "And that is exactly the problem," Zethkri interrupted. "You do not understand order. You do not respect authority. You think you know better than species that have lived in peace for thousands of years." "Peace built on what?" Chunwei asked. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the massive hall. "Peace built on ignoring the screams of slaves. On the outer worlds. Peace built on letting the strong crush the weak as long as it does not disturb your trade routes." The hall erupted in angry sounds. Aliens shouted in their languages. Some stood up from their seats. Others slammed tentacles or claws on their desks. Silence. The voice belonged to Council Prime Vorthok, the oldest member of the council. He was from a species that looked like living stone, ancient and heavy. When he spoke, everyone listened. "The human will finish his statement," Chunwei nodded to the Prime. "You fear us because we remind you of what you used to be. Before you became comfortable. Before you became safe. We are what you were when you still had the strength to fight for your beliefs." He turned to look at each section of the hall. "You say we are barbaric, but barbarism is not always evil. Sometimes it takes barbarians to do what civilized people are too afraid to attempt. Sometimes it takes people who do not know when to quit." "We know exactly what you are," said Ambassador Thizes of the Serpent Worlds. Her long neck swayed as she spoke. "You are chaos. You are violence. You are everything we have worked to eliminate from civilized space. And you, Chunwei said, looking directly at her, are stagnation? You are fear? You are the reason this galaxy has not grown or changed in 1,000 years. The noise in the hall grew louder. Some aliens were standing now, shouting at Chunwei or at each other. The translation devices could barely keep up with all the different languages being spoken at once. Prime. Vorthak raised one massive stone. Hand. The hall fell silent again. The human has spoken. Now we vote. One by one, the representatives of each species cast their votes. The Veltar voted to ban humans. The Hegemony voted to ban humans. The Serpent Worlds voted to ban humans. Each vote was displayed as a red light on the great board above the hall. Chunwei watched as the lights appeared. Red, 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 12 species, 12 red lights. Not a single vote in favor of humanity. The vote is complete, Prime Vorthak announced. By unanimous decision of the Galactic Council, humanity is hereby declared a threat to galactic peace and stability. All human presence in civilized space is banned immediately. The hall erupted in cheers from most of the aliens. They had solved their human problem. They could go back to their peaceful, orderly lives, but Prime Vorthak was not finished. The terms of this ban are as follows. All human colonies in Council space must be evacuated within 1 standard year. All human ships must leave Council territory immediately. Any human vessel found in civilized space after this period will be destroyed. Without warning, Chunwei felt something cold settle in his stomach. This was worse than he had expected. They were not just being asked to leave, they were being driven out completely. Furthermore, the Prime continued, no species may trade with humans. Number. Species may share technology with humans. No species may provide aid or assistance to humans in any form. They are to be completely cut off from galactic civilization. The cheering grew louder. Zethkri was practically dancing on his 4 legs. Other aliens were making celebration sounds in their various ways. Chunwei stood in the middle of it all, completely alone. Around him, representatives of 12 species celebrated the exile of his entire race. But his face showed no anger, no fear, no sadness, just a calm that somehow seemed more frightening than any emotion would have been. He walked slowly to the speaking platform in the center of the hall. The celebration died down as the aliens noticed him moving. By the time he reached the platform, the hall was silent again. I have one final statement, Chunwei said. His voice was still quiet, but somehow everyone could hear him perfectly. He looked up at the great board with its 12 red lights. Then he looked around the hall at all the alien faces watching him. You think you have solved a problem today, he said. You think you have made your galaxy safer by removing the dangerous humans. You believe you can go back to your comfortable lives and forget we ever existed. He paused, and in that silence, some of the aliens began to feel uneasy. But you have made a mistake, Chunwei continued. A mistake so enormous that your children will curse your names for it. Empty threats, Zethkri called out. You are one human against the entire galaxy. What can you possibly do to us? Chunwei smiled, and that smile made several aliens step back from their seats. I am not threatening you, he said. I am warning you. There are things in this galaxy that you have forgotten about. Things your ancestors knew, but you have chosen to ignore. Things that sleep in the dark between the stars, waiting for the barriers to weaken. The hall was completely silent now. Even the translation devices seemed to be holding their breath. We humans, we explore the forbidden places. We ask the questions you are afraid to ask. We know what lives in the shadows at the edge of reality. Chunwei's voice grew stronger. And we know it is coming. What is coming? Prime Vorthak asked. For the first time in the entire session, the ancient being sounded uncertain. You will find out, Chunwei said. And when you do, you will remember this day. You will remember that you had allies who could have stood with you against the dark. Allies who would have fought beside you no matter the cost. He turned and began walking toward the exit of the hall. But we will not be there, he called back without stopping. Because you chose fear over friendship. You chose comfort over courage. You chose to exile the only species in this galaxy crazy enough to fight gods. The great doors of the hall opened as Chunwei approached them. He paused in the doorway and looked back one last time at the 12 species that had just condemned his people to exile. When the darkness comes, he said, you will finally understand what you have done. But by then, it will be too late to matter. He walked through the doors and they closed behind him with a sound like thunder. The hall remained silent for a long time after he left. The aliens looked at each other, but no one seemed to know what to say. Finally, Zethkri stood up. Empty words from a defeated species, he declared. We have nothing to fear from human. Fantasies about monsters in space. But his voice lacked the confidence it had held earlier. And as the council session ended and the aliens began to file out of the hall, more than a few of them found themselves looking over their shoulders at the shadows in the corners. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, something ancient stirred in its sleep and smiled. 5 years had passed since the council banned humanity from civilized space. 5 years of peace and prosperity for the 12 species that ruled the galaxy. Trade flowed smoothly between worlds. No more human wars disrupted the careful balance of power. No more human colonies appeared in places they were not supposed to be. Ambassador Zethkri stood in his office overlooking the capital city of Veltar Prime. Through the tall windows, he could see ships from all 12 species coming and going. From the massive spaceport, the sight made him feel proud. This was what peace looked like. Sir, his assistant entered the room. The young Veltar carried a data pad in his 4 hands. The yearly report on galactic stability is ready? Zethkri took the pad and scrolled through the numbers. Trade was up 15%. Conflicts between species were down by half. Resource disputes had almost disappeared. The ban on humanity was the best decision the council had ever made. Excellent news, Zethkri said. Schedule a meeting with the other ambassadors. We should celebrate these achievements. But as he handed back the datapad, something caught his eye. A small note at the bottom of the report mentioned some minor incidents in the Outer Rim territories. Pirates had been unusually quiet lately. Several criminal organizations had simply vanished without explanation. These missing pirate groups. Zethkri said, "What happened to them?" His assistant looked uncomfortable. "We are not sure, sir. They just stopped responding to communications. When patrol ships went to investigate, they found empty space. No wreckage, no distress signals, nothing." Zethkri frowned. Pirates did not just disappear. They were like a disease that always came back no matter how many times you tried to cure it. How many groups have vanished? 17 in the past 6 months, sir, including the Bloodfang clan and the Star Reapers. Those were some of the largest pirate organizations in the galaxy. This was strange, but Zethkri decided not to worry about it. Maybe the pirates had finally realized that crime did not pay. Maybe they had found honest work. Either way, fewer pirates meant more peace. That was good news, not bad. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening in government offices and military headquarters. Strange reports were coming in from the deep space monitoring stations. Ships detected unusual energy signatures in the void between star systems. Archaeological teams working on dead worlds reported that someone had been digging in ancient ruins, but no one knew who. On the industrial world of Kefmoran, factory supervisor Yelex reviewed the monthly production reports. Everything was running smoothly except for one small problem. 3 of their mining ships had failed to return from the asteroid belt on the far edge of the system. "Send a message to Fleet Command," Yelex told his communications officer. "Request a patrol ship to investigate the missing miners." 2 days later, the patrol ship sent its report. They had found the mining ships, but they were empty, no crew. No signs of struggle. The ships were just floating dead in space with their cargo holds full of valuable minerals. The patrol captain recommended salvaging the ships and writing off the crews as lost to unknown causes, but Captain Mordex of the patrol ship did not mention something else in his official report. He did not mention the strange readings his sensors had picked up in the area. Energy patterns that did not match any known technology. Signals that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at the same time. He also did not mention the nightmares his crew had been having since they returned from the asteroid belt. Dreams of vast shapes moving in the darkness between stars. Dreams of voices calling from places that had no names. On the pleasure world of Silkthara, the ruling council was dealing with their own mystery. 3 of their most expensive resorts had reported problems with their guests. Wealthy tourists from across the galaxy were cutting their vacations short and leaving in a hurry. When asked why, they gave strange answers. The stars look wrong. From here, one hegemony noble had said before boarding his private ship, they whisper things that should not be whispered. The resort managers assumed their guests were having mental breakdowns from too much relaxation and exotic food. Rich. People often developed odd ideas when they had too much time to think, but the problems were spreading. Sensor technicians on deep space stations were requesting transfers to inter-system posts. Survey teams exploring new worlds were finding excuses to cut their missions short. Long-range freighter crews were refusing jobs that took them too far. From Civilization. The Council Intelligence Division collected all these reports in their vast computers, but no one could find a pattern. Pirates vanishing, mining crews disappearing, tourists having bad dreams, and workers getting nervous about deep space assignments. None of it seemed connected. Director Vashtel of Council Intelligence was known for seeing patterns where others saw random events. She had predicted 3 wars and stopped 2 assassination attempts by noticing small details that others missed. But even she could not make sense of the current situation. "Show me the map again," she told her analysis team. The holographic display showed the galaxy with red dots marking each strange incident. Missing ships here, abandoned mining operations there, reports of unusual energy readings scattered across the outer rim. At first glance it looked random, but as Vashtel studied it longer, something bothered her. "Computer, show me human space." From before the ban, she said. New dots appeared on the map, marking all the worlds and stations where humans had lived and worked. Vashtel felt a chill run down her spine. The pattern of strange incidents formed a rough circle around the area where humans used to be. "When did these incidents start?" she asked. The first reports came in approximately 4 years and 7 months ago, her assistant replied. 6 months after the human evacuation was completed. Vashtel stared at the map for a long time. The obvious explanation was that the incidents were connected to the humans somehow. Maybe they were taking revenge for their exile. Maybe they had developed new technology to strike back at the council species, but that did not feel right. The humans had left quietly when ordered to go. Their evacuation had been organized and peaceful. They had taken their people and their ships and disappeared beyond the galactic rim without causing any trouble. "Computer, show me current intelligence on human activities," she commanded. "No current intelligence available," the computer responded. "Human space is beyond our sensor. Range, last confirmed contact was 4 years and 2 months ago." That was the strangest part of all. Humanity had simply vanished, no attempts to communicate. No efforts to negotiate their return, no raids on council shipping or attacks on council worlds. They had gone into the darkness beyond the galaxy and stayed there. For a species that the council had considered violent and unpredictable, the humans were being remarkably quiet. In the council chambers, the 12 ambassadors were meeting to discuss the upcoming anniversary of the human ban. They planned to make it an official holiday celebrating galactic peace and unity. 5 years of prosperity, Zethkri announced to the assembly. 5 years without human interference in our affairs. I propose we make this day a permanent celebration. The other ambassadors agreed enthusiastically. Only Prime Vorthak seemed less than completely happy with the situation. "Have we received any word from the humans?" the ancient being asked. "Any attempts at communication or negotiation?" "Nothing," replied Ambassador Thizes. "They have maintained complete silence since leaving our space. Perhaps they have finally learned their place in the galaxy. Or perhaps they are planning something," Prime Vorthak said quietly. The other ambassadors laughed at this suggestion. What could one exiled species do against the combined might of 12 civilized worlds? Even if they are planning revenge? Said Ambassador Crystal. They are just one species with limited resources. We are 12 species with the most powerful fleets in the galaxy. What threat could they possibly pose? Prime Vorthak did not answer, but he remembered Chunwei's final words. The human ambassador had seemed strangely calm for someone whose entire species was being exiled. There had been something in his eyes that suggested he knew things the Council did not dot far beyond the edge of civilized space. In a region where star maps showed only empty void, something was happening. Ships moved through the darkness, but they were not the sleek vessels of Council species. These ships looked different, stranger. They hummed with energy that did not appear in any physics textbook. On a world that officially did not exist, humans were working. But they were not the same humans who had been exiled 5 years ago. They moved with purpose and urgency, like people preparing for a war that only they could see coming. Dr. Sarah Voss stood in a laboratory that would have been impossible according to Council science. The walls seemed to bend in directions that did not exist. Machines measured things that had no names. And in the center of it all, a device that hurt to look at directly pulsed with light that was not quite light. How long until the barriers fail completely? She asked her research team. At current decay rates, 18 months, replied her assistant. Maybe less if the degradation accelerates. Sarah nodded grimly. 18 months to prepare for something that had destroyed civilizations far older and more powerful than any current species. 18 months to become something strong enough to fight entities that existed partially outside reality itself. Any word from the scouts? She asked. Team 7 reported unusual activity in the Veltar system. Something is stirring in the deep places. Team 12 found evidence of barrier damage near the hegemony worlds. The protection is weakening faster than our models predicted. Sarah looked at the impossible device in the center of her lab. It was built from technology that the Council would have called fantasy. Plans left behind by a species so advanced that they had transcended normal existence. Plans that came with warnings written in languages that predated the formation of the galaxy itself. The architects had tried to warn everyone before they disappeared. They had tried to prepare the younger species for what was coming. But the Council species had ignored the warnings. They had dismissed the architects as myths and legends. They had chosen comfortable ignorance over uncomfortable truth. Only humanity had listened. Only humanity had been willing to pay the price for knowledge that could drive lesser minds insane. Continue the preparations, Sarah ordered. And send word to Admiral Martinez. Tell him we need more time, but I do not think we are going to get it. In another part of the hidden facility, Admiral Martinez stood before a wall covered with star charts. But these were not normal navigation charts. They showed things that existed in the spaces between spaces. Currents of force that flowed through. Dimensions that had no names. Pathways used by things that should not exist. Sir, his communications officer approached. Long-range sensors are detecting increased activity in the forbidden zones. Whatever is out there is getting restless. Martinez nodded. He had expected this. The barriers were failing faster than anyone had predicted. Soon, the things that lived in the cosmic dark would break through into normal space. And when they did, the peaceful civilizations of the Council would learn what real terror looked like. Status on Project Prometheus? He asked. 70% complete, sir. But we still need more volunteers for the enhancement program. Martinez felt a familiar weight in his chest. The enhancement program was necessary, but it changed people in ways that could never be undone. Volunteers who entered the program came out as something more than human, but also something less. They gained the ability to fight impossible enemies, but they lost pieces of their humanity in the process. How many volunteers do we have? 50,000 so far, sir. Dr. Voss estimates we need at least 200,000 for the first wave. And that meant asking 150,000 more humans to sacrifice their humanity for the sake of a galaxy that had exiled them. It meant creating an army of beings who could wound reality itself, fight in dimensions that did not exist, and face horrors that would drive normal minds to madness. It meant becoming the monsters necessary to fight even worse monsters. "Put out another call for volunteers," Martinez ordered. "Make sure they understand what they are signing up for. Make sure they know there is no going back." As reports of strange incidents continued to flow into Council Intelligence Director, Vashtel made a decision that would have shocked her superiors. She decided to send a deep space probe toward the region where humanity had vanished. The probe was launched in secret, its mission classified at the highest levels. It would take 6 months to reach the edge of human space, assuming it could find any trace of them in the vast emptiness beyond the galactic rim. But as the probe disappeared into the darkness, Vashtel could not shake the feeling that humanity had not simply vanished. They were out there somewhere doing something. And when they finally revealed themselves again, the galaxy would never be the same. In the depths of space, ancient things that had slept for millions of years began to wake up. The barriers that had kept them contained were cracking. Soon they would be free to hunt again, free to feed on the energy of living worlds, free to spread their hunger across the galaxy. But for the first time in cosmic ages, they would not be unopposed. Somewhere in the darkness, their oldest enemies were preparing. To meet them again, the humans were coming home. Dr. Sarah Voss had not slept properly in 3 days. Her eyes were red and strained from staring at screens filled with data that made her head hurt, but she could not stop working. Every minute counted now. The laboratory around her hummed with machines that should not have been possible. Some of them were built from human technology. Others came from plans left behind by the architects, a species so ancient that their youngest artifacts were older than the entire Council civilization. "Doctor, you need to see this," called Dr. Kim from across the room. He was standing next to a device that looked like a twisted metal tree. Its branches moved slowly, even though no wind could touch them in the sealed laboratory. Sarah walked over to Kim, careful not to look directly at the device. Looking at architect technology for too long could cause headaches, nausea, and sometimes worse things. Some researchers had stared too long and started speaking in languages that did not exist. "The barrier readings are getting worse," Kim said, pointing to a screen covered with numbers and graphs. "The decay rate has doubled in the past week. At this speed, we have maybe 10 months before complete failure." Sarah felt her stomach drop. 10 months was not enough time. They needed at least 2 years to finish their preparations. 2 years to build enough enhanced soldiers. 2 years to create weapons that could hurt things that existed in multiple dimensions at once. "Show me the worst areas," she said. Kim pressed some buttons, and a map of the galaxy appeared in the air above them. Red spots marked places where the barriers were weakest. Sarah counted at least 20 major failure points, scattered across Council space like infected wounds. "The Veltar system is particularly bad," Kim continued. "Something is pushing against the barrier from the other side, hard." Sarah stared at the map. The Veltar system was home to over 8 billion aliens. If the barrier failed there first, they would all die in ways that were too horrible to imagine. And then whatever broke through would spread to other systems. "Any word from the archaeological teams?" she asked. Team 12 found another architect facility on Kepler 442. It was bigger than the others, but it had been damaged. Something had torn through it from the inside. That was not good news. The architects had been incredibly advanced, far beyond anything the current galaxy could imagine. If something had destroyed their facilities from within, it meant the enemy was already active when the architects went extinct. "What about the warning messages? Have we translated any more of them?" Kim looked uncomfortable. "Dr. Martinez thinks she made a breakthrough yesterday, but when she tried to explain what she had learned, she started crying and would not stop for 3 hours. She is resting now," Sarah nodded. This happened sometimes when researchers learned too much too quickly about what was coming. The human mind was not designed to understand cosmic horror on such a scale. Even enhanced minds could only take so. Much before they started to break, she walked to another section of the laboratory, where a team was working on what they called the Memory Archive. It was a collection of architect data crystals that contained the final records of their civilization. Each crystal held thousands of years of information, but reading them was dangerous. "Dr. Peterson, any new discoveries?" she asked the team. Leader Peterson looked up from a crystal that glowed with soft blue light. His face was pale and his hands shook slightly. "We found their last message," he said quietly. "The final transmission before they went dark." Sarah felt excitement and fear at the same time. The architect's final message might contain crucial information about fighting the enemy, but it might also contain truths that were too terrible to know. What did it say? Peterson handed her a translation pad. The words on the screen were simple, but they made Sarah's blood turn cold. "We chose exile over extinction. We thought we could run far enough and fast enough to escape the hunger. We were wrong. It followed us beyond the edge of reality itself. Now we face a choice between transformation and annihilation. We choose transformation, knowing that what we become will no longer be us. To the species that come after, we leave this warning: do not repeat our mistake. Do not run. Stand and fight no matter the cost. Become monsters if you must, but never become prey." Sarah read the message 3 times before she truly understood what it meant. The architects had tried to escape the enemy by leaving normal reality behind. They had transcended physical existence and become something else entirely, but even that had not saved them. "There is more," Peterson said. He showed her another screen with technical diagrams that hurt to look at. They left plans for something called the Prometheus Protocol. It is a way to enhance living beings so they can fight enemies that exist in multiple dimensions. Sarah studied the diagrams. They showed how to alter the fundamental structure of consciousness itself, how to give minds the ability to perceive and interact with realities that normal beings could not even detect. But the cost was enormous. "What happens to the volunteers?" she asked. "They become something new," Peterson replied. "Not quite human anymore, but not alien either. They gain the ability to wound space and time itself. They can fight things that should not exist. But they lose pieces of their humanity in the process." Sarah thought about the hundreds of volunteers who had already undergone the early stages of enhancement. They were braver and stronger than normal humans, but there was something different in their eyes now. Something that made regular people uncomfortable when they looked at them too long. "How many volunteers do we need for full implementation of the protocol?" According to the architect calculations, at least 500,000 enhanced soldiers for the first wave. 2 million for the full campaign. Sarah felt dizzy. They were asking millions of humans to sacrifice their humanity to save a galaxy that had exiled them. It was insane. But the alternative was worse. A communication screen near the wall started beeping. Sarah walked over and activated it. Admiral Martinez appeared, his face grim. "Sarah, we have a problem," he said without greeting. "Long-range sensors are picking up massive energy buildups in the forbidden zones. Something big is about to happen." "How big?" Sarah asked. "Big enough to crack open reality in at least 3 star systems. The barriers are not just failing anymore. Something is actively breaking them down from the other side." Sarah felt the laboratory spin around her. This was happening too fast. They were not ready for a full-scale invasion. "How long do we have?" "Best estimate is 6 months before the first major breakthrough." "Maybe less. 6 months." Sarah looked around the laboratory at all the unfinished projects. The weapons that were only half built. The enhancement procedures that still needed testing. The soldiers who were not fully trained. "Admiral, we need to accelerate everything. Start full implementation of the Prometheus Protocol immediately." "Sarah, you know what that means? The volunteers who undergo full enhancement this quickly, most of them will not be recognizably human when the process is complete." Sarah closed her eyes and thought about the billions of innocent aliens living in council space. They had no idea what was coming for them. They had exiled humanity and continued with their comfortable lives, believing they were safe. "Do it," she said. "Begin full enhancement of all available volunteers. And send word to the refugee camps. We need more people." "What about the psychological evaluations? The safety protocols?" "There is no time for safety. We have 6 months to create an army capable of fighting gods, whatever it takes." After Martinez signed off, Sarah sat down in her chair and put her head in her hands. She thought about her sister back on Earth, who had volunteered for enhancement 2 weeks ago. By the time this was over, her sister would be something that could tear holes in reality with her bare hands. But she might not remember Sarah's name, or care about human emotions anymore. The door to the laboratory opened and Dr. Kim approached her. "Doctor, there is something else you need to see. We found another architect message. This one is different." Sarah looked up. "Different how?" "It seems to be addressed to humanity specifically. The translation computers say it was written after the architects made contact with early human civilization, thousands of years ago." Kim handed her another translation pad. This message was longer than the others and written in a style that seemed almost desperate. "To the children of Earth, the young species that burn so brightly with rage and hope, we have watched you from the spaces between stars. We have seen your wars and your love, your cruelty and your sacrifice. You are different from the other species. You do not accept defeat. You do not bow to impossible odds. This is why we choose you." Sarah kept reading, her hands shaking. "The hunger that destroyed us is returning. It sleeps now in the deep places, but the barriers we built are weakening. In time, it will wake and feed again. The other species of your era are too civilized to fight it. They have forgotten how to be savage when savagery is required. But you remember." The message continued with technical details about the enemy. It described entities that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Creatures that fed on consciousness itself, things that could devour the concept of existence, and leave nothing behind except emptiness that had never been filled. "We leave you our knowledge and our warnings. We hope you will succeed where we failed. But know this, victory will require you to become something that your current selves would consider monstrous. You will have to sacrifice your humanity to save humanity. This is the price of fighting gods." The final part of the message made Sarah's blood freeze. "The enemy knows about you now. It has tasted your thoughts through the cracks in reality. It remembers the species that wounded it before. The barriers were built. It will come for you first when it breaks free. This is both your greatest danger and your greatest advantage. When it focuses on destroying you, the other species will have time to evacuate. Use that time wisely." Sarah set down the translation pad and looked around the laboratory. Everywhere she looked, humans were working on projects that would have been considered impossible 5 years ago. Weapons that could cut through multiple dimensions. Armor that existed in several realities at once. Enhancement procedures that turned people into living weapons. They were becoming exactly what the architects had warned about. Monsters, but they were becoming monsters by choice, to protect people who had cast them out. "Dr. Kim," she said quietly, "send a message to all department heads. Tell them we are moving to emergency protocols. All volunteers report for full enhancement immediately. No more delays." "Doctor, are you sure?" "Once we start full enhancement on this scale, there is no going back. Most of the volunteers will become something that can fight the things coming for us," Sarah finished. "Yes, I know." As Kim left to send the message, Sarah looked at one more screen. It showed Earth, where millions of humans lived normal lives with no idea that their exiled cousins were preparing for a war that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Soon, many of those people would volunteer to give up their humanity forever. They would become living weapons in a conflict that spanned dimensions. They would fight enemies that could not be killed by normal means. in battles that would take place in realities that had no names. And if they won, the galaxy would never thank them for it. The council species would never know how close they came to complete annihilation. They would continue their peaceful lives while humanity guarded them from threats they could not imagine. But if they lost, everything would end. Not just life, but the very concept of existence itself would be devoured. By hungry things from the spaces between realities, Sarah activated her personal communication device and sent a message to her sister. Maria, I love you. I am proud of you for volunteering. When this is over, you might not remember me the same way. But know that what you are becoming will save billions of lives. Be strong. Then she deleted the message without sending it. There was no point in making her sister sad before the transformation. Soon enough, Maria would become something that did not feel sadness the way humans did. The laboratory around Sarah hummed with increasing activity as the emergency protocols took effect. All across the hidden facility, humans were preparing to stop being human. In 6 months, the barriers would fail and cosmic horror would pour into the galaxy. But when it arrived, it would find an enemy that had learned the architect's final lesson. Sometimes, to save what you love, you have to become something that your loved ones would fear. The first barrier failed on a Tuesday morning in the Veltar system. Commander Velkoth was drinking his morning tea when the alarms started screaming throughout his space station. He had been monitoring deep space for 15 years and had never heard the emergency klaxon sound with such urgency. Report, he shouted as he ran to the command center. Sir, massive energy spike in Sector 7, his sensor operator called out. Something just tore a hole in space itself. The readings are ... impossible. Velkoth looked at the main screen and felt his blood turn cold. Where there had been empty space an hour ago, there was now a swirling vortex of darkness that seemed to eat light itself, and things were coming through it. Get me Fleet Command immediately, he ordered. And send a general evacuation alert to all civilian ships in the area, but even as he spoke, Velkoth knew it was too late. The things emerging from the tier in space moved faster than anything he had ever seen. They did not look like ships, or creatures, or anything that belonged in normal reality. They were patches of absolute darkness that bent space around them as they moved. The first patrol ship to investigate simply vanished. No explosion, no debris. One moment it was there. The next moment it had never existed at all. The sensor records showed no trace that a ship had ever been in that location. Sir, we are receiving reports from across the system, the communications officer said, his voice shaking. Similar tiers are opening near the third planet, and the mining station on the asteroid belt just went silent. Within 3 hours, the entire Veltar system was cut off from the rest of the galaxy. The last transmission from the capital world was a single word repeated over and over, hungry. On the council homeworld, emergency sessions were called as reports came in from across the galaxy. The hegemony lost 2 entire star systems in the first day. The Serpent Worlds reported that their outermost colonies had gone dark. Even the mighty Kethmorn Empire found their border fleets powerless against enemies that could not be fought with conventional weapons. Ambassador Zethkri stood before the emergency assembly, his usual confidence completely gone. Fellow council members, we face a threat unlike anything in recorded history. Our fleets are being destroyed by enemies that seem to exist outside the normal laws of physics. Prime Vorthak raised his massive stone hand. What do our scientists say about these entities? They have no explanations, Zethkri admitted. The creatures appear to feed on energy, matter, and... He paused, unable to believe what he was about to say. Consciousness itself. Entire populations are vanishing without trace. Not killed, but erased from existence completely. Ambassador Thizes of the Serpent World spoke up, her voice filled with panic. My homeworld reports that the stars themselves are going out. Not exploding or burning out naturally, but simply ceasing to exist, as if they had never been born. The assembly fell into chaos as representatives from different species tried to speak at once. Some demanded military action. Others called for evacuation of the outer worlds. A few suggested trying to negotiate with the invaders, but Prime Vorthek had lived longer than any other being in the council. His species measured their lives in geological ages, and he remembered stories that others had forgotten. Ancient legends about things that lived in the spaces between realities. Warnings passed down from civilizations that had vanished long before the current galaxy was born. "There is one option we have not discussed," the ancient being said quietly. The assembly fell silent. When Prime Vorthak spoke, everyone listened. "We need to contact the humans." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Dozens of aliens started shouting at once. How could they possibly trust the species they had exiled? The humans were probably responsible for this invasion somehow. It would be surrender to their former enemies. Silence. Prime Vorthek's voice boomed through the chamber with such force that the walls themselves seemed to shake. "Listen to yourselves. Your worlds are being devoured by entities from beyond reality, and you worry about pride?" Zethkri stepped forward. "Prime Vorthak, with respect, the humans have been gone for 6 years. We do not even know if they still exist, and why would they help us after we exiled them?" "Because," Prime Vorthak said slowly, "the human ambassador warned us this would happen." His final words were about darkness coming from between the stars. He knew. The assembly fell quiet as they remembered Chunwei's final speech. At the time, they had dismissed his warnings as empty threats. Now those words seemed like prophecy. "Even if we could contact them," Ambassador Crixtal said, "what could one species do against enemies that our combined fleets cannot touch?" Prime Vorthak did not answer immediately. He was thinking about human history, about the species that had fought wars on hundreds of worlds and never learned to accept defeat. About beings who would charge into hopeless battles simply because someone needed to try. "They might know something we do not," he said finally. "Send the message." Director Vashtel of Council Intelligence had been working around the clock since the invasions began. Her department was the only one that had any hope of contacting humanity, if they could be contacted at all. The deep space probe she had sent toward human territory was still months away from its destination. "Send emergency signals on all frequencies," she ordered her team. "Broadcast toward every coordinate where humans were last detected. Tell them we need their help." For 3 days, the messages went out into the darkness beyond the galactic rim. Desperate pleas for assistance from the species that had been cast out in disgrace. Appeals to shared humanity from beings who had never considered humans truly civilized. On the 4th day, they got an answer. The message came through on an encrypted channel that should not have existed. The signal was stronger than anything the Council could produce, suggesting technology far beyond their capabilities. And the voice that spoke was unmistakably human. "Council Command, this is Admiral Martinez of the Human Defense Fleet. We have received your distress calls. Be advised that we are already engaged with the entities you call invaders. We know what they are and how to fight them." Vashtel stared at the communication screen in disbelief. The humans not only still existed, but they were already fighting. The creatures that had devastated half the galaxy in less than a week. "Admiral Martinez," she replied quickly. "This is Director Vashtel of Council Intelligence. How many ships do you have? When can you reach our territory?" There was a long pause before Martinez answered. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Colder. "Director, you misunderstand the situation. We are not coming to rescue you. We are coming to do what needs to be done. Your fleets should evacuate all civilian populations to the galactic core immediately. What follows will not be safe for unprotected minds." "What do you mean?" Vashtel asked. "We mean that to fight monsters, we have become monsters ourselves. The beings you will meet are no longer entirely human. They have been enhanced to fight enemies that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Your people should not look directly at our ships or attempt to communicate with our soldiers during combat operations." Vashtel felt a chill run down her spine. "Enhanced how?" "In ways that would drive your scientists mad if they tried to understand." We have technologies that should not exist and weapons that violate the fundamental laws of physics. Our soldiers can wound reality itself and fight in dimensions that have no names. The communication cut out, leaving Vashtel staring at a blank screen. She tried to contact Martinez again, but there was no response. The humans were coming, but they were no longer the same species that had been exiled 6 years ago. In the Outer Rim territories, something impossible began happening. The advancing darkness suddenly stopped. Reports came in of strange battles taking place in areas where space itself seemed to be breaking down. Council sensors detected energy signatures that made no sense and weapons fire that appeared to come from nowhere. Captain Mordex was commanding a refugee evacuation when he witnessed the first human ship in combat. His vessel was escorting civilian transports away from a system where reality was collapsing when something emerged from a fold in space that hurt to look at. The human ship was beautiful and terrible at the same time. It moved in ways that violated every law of physics, sliding between dimensions like a knife through fabric. Its hull seemed to be made of crystallized space, and energy that was not quite energy flowed across its surface in patterns that made Mordex's crew violently ill when they tried to watch. But it was effective. The darkness that had been consuming everything in its path recoiled from the human vessel like living shadow afraid of light. Weapons that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously struck at enemies that normal beings could not even see. The battle lasted 17 minutes and took place in at least 4 different realities. When it was over, the tier in space had been sealed, and the human ship was gone. The only evidence that anything had happened was the restored starfield and a brief message on an open channel. Civilian vessels, continue your evacuation to the galactic core. Do not approach the combat zones. Do not attempt to assist. We will handle this. The voice sounded human, but there was something underneath it. Something that suggested the speaker had seen things that normal minds were not meant to witness. Similar encounters were reported across the galaxy. Human ships appearing from nowhere to engage the invading entities. Battles that took place in twisted space where the laws of physics no longer applied. Each engagement ended with the darkness pushed back and reality restored, but also with the disturbing certainty that humanity had changed in fundamental ways. On the Council homeworld, Prime Vorthak received reports from the front lines with growing unease. The humans were winning, but at what cost? The few surviving witnesses described soldiers who moved like living nightmares and spoke in voices that echoed from multiple dimensions. Sir, his aide approached nervously, we have received a message from the human command. They are requesting a meeting. Where? Prime Vorthak asked. They want you to come to them. They have provided coordinates for a rendezvous point in neutral space. Prime Vorthak looked at the coordinates and felt ancient memories stirring. The location was in a region that his people's oldest legends called the Dark Between. A place where space was thin and reality was uncertain, a place that sensible beings avoided. Prepare my ship, he ordered. It is time to see what humanity has become. The journey to the rendezvous point took 2 days. As Prime Vorthak's ship approached the coordinates, his crew began reporting strange sensor readings. Space itself seemed different here, charged with energies that had no name. The stars looked wrong, as if they were being viewed through water or colored glass, and then they saw the human fleet. There were hundreds of ships, but they did not look like the vessels humanity had used before their exile. These ships existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their hulls shifting between states of matter that should not have been possible. Some appeared to be made of crystallized time, others seemed to be constructed from folded space itself. And the largest ship, the one at the center of the formation, was built from something that Prime Vorthak's ancient mind recognized with horror. It was made from the substance of reality itself, torn from the foundations of existence, and shaped into a weapon of impossible power. A communication came through on all frequencies simultaneously, speaking directly into the minds of everyone. On Prime Vorthak's ship. Council Prime, this is Admiral Martinez. Welcome to the war you never knew was coming. Prepare to learn what your exile has cost you. As Prime Vorthak's ship was drawn into the human fleet by forces that operated outside normal physics, he understood that the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had not just survived their exile. They had transcended it, becoming something that could fight gods and win. But victory had come at a price that would have broken any other species. The humans had sacrificed their humanity to save a galaxy that had cast them out. And now they were offering salvation to the very beings who had condemned them. The question was whether the Council could accept help from saviors who had become something that their former selves would have feared. Prime Vorthak stepped off his shuttle onto the human flagship, and immediately knew he had made a terrible mistake. The air itself felt wrong, charged with energies that made his ancient stone body ache in ways it had never ached before. The walls around him seemed to shift and bend when he was not looking directly at them, but it was the humans that truly frightened him. The being that met him at the airlock had once been human, but now it was something else entirely. It stood 7 feet tall, its skin pale as starlight and marked with patterns that seemed to move on their own. Its eyes were the worst part. They looked like windows into spaces that should not exist, showing depths that went on forever. "Council." "Prime," the creature said, and its voice came from several directions at once. "I am Lieutenant Commander Hayes. Admiral Martinez is waiting for you in the command center." As they walked through the ship, Prime Vorthak saw more of the enhanced humans. Some floated slightly above the floor, as if gravity was optional for them. Others moved through walls like they were made of mist. A few seemed to exist in multiple places at the same time, their forms blurring between different positions. None of them looked at him directly. When their strange eyes moved in his direction, they seemed to be seeing through him to something far beyond. It was as if the normal world had become transparent to them, and they spent most of their attention on realities that others could not perceive. The command center was a vast space filled with displays that showed impossible things. Star maps that included dimensions with no names. Tactical screens that tracked enemies moving through 11 different realities simultaneously. And in the center of it all stood Admiral Martinez. Prime Vorthak recognized him immediately, even though Martinez had changed beyond recognition. The human admiral's body was tall and lean, but it seemed to be made of something that was not quite flesh. His uniform appeared to be woven from crystallized space, and when he moved, reality rippled around him like water. "Council Prime," Martinez said, turning to face his guest. "Thank you for coming. I know this must be difficult for you." "Admiral Martinez," Prime Vorthak replied carefully. "Your people have changed significantly since we last met." Martinez smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "Change was necessary. You cannot fight gods with mortal weapons. You cannot wound infinity with finite minds. We became what we needed to become." He gestured to the displays around. "Them, would you like to see what we are fighting?" Before Prime Vorthak could answer, the screens changed to show the battle taking place in real time across the galaxy. The ancient being watched in horror as creatures of living darkness engaged human ships in combat that spanned multiple dimensions. The enemy entities were vast beyond comprehension. Each one was larger than a star system, existing simultaneously in spaces that folded back on themselves. They fed on reality itself, consuming the concepts of matter and energy and leaving behind voids that had never been filled, but the humans were holding them back. Ships that existed in 11 dimensions fired weapons that could wound the fabric of existence itself. Soldiers who had transcended normal biology fought hand-to-hand with entities made of pure hunger, their enhanced bodies able to survive in spaces where physics had no meaning. "How many of your people have undergone this transformation?" Prime Vorthak asked quietly. 5 million volunteers for full enhancement," Martinez replied. 2 million more for partial modification. It was not enough, so we began converting entire populations. By the end of the war, most of humanity will be something beyond what we once were. Prime Vorthak felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. "And the cost?" Martinez was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a sadness that seemed to come from multiple realities at once. I no longer remember. My daughter's name, he said simply. I know I had one. I know I loved her. But the enhancement process removes memories that are too human, too tied to mortality. I can perceive 17 dimensions simultaneously and wound reality with my thoughts. But I cannot remember what my wife's laugh sounded like. The displays around them showed human soldiers fighting impossible battles with perfect coordination. They moved like pieces of a single mind, each one knowing exactly what the others would do before they did it. They were magnificent and terrible. To watch. This is what it costs to fight entities that exist beyond normal reality, Martinez continued. We had to become like them in order to hurt them. We had to sacrifice our humanity to save it. Why? Prime Vorthok asked. Why did you do this for people who exiled you? Martinez turned to look at him directly, and Prime Vorthok almost stepped backward from the intensity of that gaze. Those eyes held knowledge of things that normal minds were not meant to comprehend. Because someone had to, Martinez said. Because the alternative was the end of everything. Not just death, but the complete erasure of existence itself. Every thought that was ever thought. Every love that was ever felt. Every dream that was ever dreamed. All of it would have been consumed and forgotten. On the screens, a massive battle was reaching its climax. Thousands of enhanced humans worked together to drive back an entity that existed in spaces between spaces. Their combined will reshaped reality itself, forcing the creature back into the void where it belonged. We are winning, Martinez said, watching the displays. It will take another year to drive them all back and repair the barriers, but we are winning. And then what? Prime Vorthok asked. What happens when the war is over? Martinez was quiet for a long time. Around them, the enhanced humans continued their work with mechanical precision. They spoke in languages that included concepts normal minds could not understand. They moved through realities that had no names. Then you go back to your peaceful lives? Martinez said finally. You rebuild your worlds and continue your civilized existence. You trade and explore and create art just like you did before. And humanity? Humanity as you knew it no longer exists, Martinez replied. We have become something else. Something necessary, but no longer truly human. We will continue to guard the barriers. We will watch for signs of the enemy's return. We will be the guardians that the galaxy needs but does not want. Prime Vorthok felt ancient sadness fill his stone heart. Admiral, the Council realizes it made a mistake. We would welcome humanity back. We could work together to rebuild. Martinez laughed, and the sound echoed from dimensions that had no up or down. Council Prime, look around you. Look at what we have become. Could these beings sit in your council chambers and debate trade agreements? Could they walk among your people without causing panic? Prime Vorthok looked at the enhanced humans working around him. They were magnificent in their terrible purpose, but he knew Martinez was right. Normal beings would flee in terror from creatures that existed in multiple realities simultaneously. Besides, Martinez continued, we no longer need your approval. Or your acceptance. We have transcended the need for civilization as you understand it. We have become something beyond politics and diplomacy. The main display showed the final stages of the battle. The last of the invading entities was being driven back through a tier in reality that human will was slowly sealing. The war was ending, but Prime Vorthok knew the real struggle was just beginning. What about forgiveness? He asked desperately. What about redemption? Martinez turned away from the displays and walked to a window that looked out into space. But Prime Vorthok could see that the Admiral was not looking at normal space. His enhanced eyes were seeing through layers of reality to observe dimensions that existed beyond normal perception. Forgiveness is a human emotion, Martinez said softly. And we are no longer entirely human. We remember being hurt by your decision, but we do not feel anger about it anymore. Anger is inefficient when you are fighting for the survival of existence itself. Then what do you feel? Responsibility, Martinez replied. We feel the weight of protecting beings who cannot protect themselves. We feel the burden of knowledge that others cannot bear. We feel the loneliness of standing guard over people who will never understand what we have sacrificed for them. On the displays, the final enemy entity was pushed back into the void. The tier in reality sealed itself with a sound like cosmic thunder. Across the galaxy, the invasion was ending. Humanity had won. But as Prime Vorthak watched the enhanced humans celebrate their victory, he realized that winning and surviving were not the same thing. Humanity had saved the galaxy by becoming something that could no longer truly be part of it. "The barriers are restored," Martinez announced to his crew. "Begin Phase 2 operations. Establish monitoring stations in the deep void. We will not be caught unprepared again." He turned back to Prime Vorthak. "Council Prime, your shuttle is ready to return you to your people. Tell them that the threat is ended. Tell them they can resume their normal lives. What should I tell them about humanity?" Martinez smiled that cold, distant smile again. "Tell them that we are still here, watching from the spaces between realities, standing guard against threats they cannot imagine. But tell them not to look for us among the stars. We exist now in places that normal eyes cannot see." As Prime Vorthak walked back to his shuttle, he passed groups of enhanced humans who were already preparing for their next mission. They spoke in mathematical concepts and moved through dimensions that folded back on themselves. They were preparing to become the eternal guardians of a galaxy that would never know they existed. The shuttle ride back to Council space was quiet and lonely. Prime Vorthak stared out at the stars and thought about the price that had been paid for their survival. Humanity had sacrificed everything they were to save everything that could be. When he arrived back at the council chambers, representatives from all 12 species were waiting for him. They wanted to know about the humans. They wanted to know if reconciliation was possible. They wanted to know if they could repair the damage done by the exile. Prime Vorthak looked at their hopeful faces and felt the weight of truth settling on his shoulders. "The war is over," he told them. "The threat has been eliminated. We are safe." "And the humans?" Ambassador Zethkri asked eagerly. "Will they return to civilized space?" Prime Vorthak was quiet for a long moment. He thought about Martinez and his crew, beings who had transcended humanity itself to fight impossible wars. He thought about soldiers who could wound reality, but could no longer remember their children's names. "The humans are gone," he said finally. "They have become something else. Something necessary, but no longer recognizable as the species we once knew. But surely we can negotiate," Zethkri insisted. "Surely we can make amends." "You can try," Prime Vorthak replied, "but they no longer need our approval. They no longer seek our acceptance. They have moved beyond such concerns." He looked around the chamber at the representatives of species who had been saved by beings they had cast out in fear and ignorance. "We voted to exile them because we thought they were dangerous," he continued. "We were right. They were dangerous. But their danger was not to us. It was to the things that threatened all existence. We exiled our protectors because we were too afraid to understand what protection required." The chamber fell silent as the representatives absorbed this truth. They had been saved, but by saviors who could no longer forgive because they could no longer feel the human emotions that forgiveness required. "They will watch over us," Prime Vorthak concluded. "They will guard us from threats we cannot comprehend. But they will do it from the shadows, from the spaces between realities, from dimensions we cannot perceive. We will never see them again, because we chose exile when we should have chosen trust." As the council members filed out of the chamber, each returning to worlds that had been saved by the sacrifice of beings they had rejected, Prime Vorthak remained alone with his thoughts. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, enhanced humans stood guard over a galaxy that would never thank them. They watched for threats that normal minds could not imagine. They protected people who would never know their names. And they did it all without anger, without resentment, and without hope of reward. Because they had become something beyond such human concerns. They had become exactly what the galaxy needed them to be. And it was too late for anything else to matter.